to introduce Alistair McNaught. Now, we're delighted to have Alistair join us. Alistair's one of the senior advisors from Jisc and he has worked very closely over the years with library staff and publishers, really steering the development of significant publications and significant strategies that focus on inclusion, including the Publishers Look Up UK service, and really contributing to accessibility training for publishers and library staff alike. So I'm going to now sign off, and I'm going to pass you on to Alistair, who will provide our outline for the webinar today. Thank you, Alistair.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. Hi, everybody. Thank you for giving up your lunch times or whatever you have given up to join us. The title for today, Not Big, Not Clever, but Not Trivial, says it all, really, because the sorts of things that will make a real difference are not big things. They're not massive. They're not going to cost you lots of money. They're not going to require lots of cleverness, and they're not things that require loads and loads of technical expertise. So they aren't big, they aren't clever, but they're not trivial in terms of the benefits that they give to your disabled learners, and indeed to all your learners, because it's often said, and it is a truism, but it's still worth repeating, that if you get things right for disabled people, if you get inclusion right for some, you tend to get it right for most. And so there's some real benefits for all learners. So let's have a look then at a good starting point, which is us as we tackle this, us as learning providers, as educational institutions, as advisory services, whatever it is, us making sure that we've got the right kind of mindset, the right attitudes. Because sometimes in conversations with library services or with learning providers about their alternative format service or what they offer for print-impaired people, sometimes you get the sense of almost, well, we do what we can, and you know, surely that's enough. And I think it's really important for us to get hold of the quotes on the screen before the students get hold of the quotes on the screen, because they have a legal right to having the information that we provide as part of our teaching and learning provided in an accessible format. Okay, Equality Act 2010, Part 2, Chapter 2, Section 20, and so on. You can go and look it up for yourself if you want afterwards. But what I've done here is I've concatenated a couple of sort of paragraphs that were next to each other, just to miss out some of the verbiage in the middle. But it's very clear that the provision that is regarded as reasonable adjustment is to make sure that first of all, auxiliary aids that the learners might need are in place, and that's probably not going to be the focus of this session, but there are some great tools, some free tools that you can use to support your learners. You've got the Scottish Voices in Scotland. In England we've got the TechDisc Voices, so text-to-speech can be a real way of providing those auxiliary aids for nothing, because the basic tools have free versions and open source versions. But the critical thing I want to look at down here is ensuring that information is provided in an accessible format. Okay, that is what the law says is a reasonable adjustment. So the first time that we get students unable to complete their assignments at the same speed or to the same depth as other students, because it took 3 weeks to get the book scanned or copied or whatever, the first time that happens and the student is kind of legally savvy enough to know that that information should have been available in an accessible format, that spells potential trouble. So that's a bit of an issue for us as learning providers, because we don't actually provide the information. The information is provided by other people, by perhaps publishers, by aggregators, by learning platforms, ebook platforms, etc. However, if we start at the beginning, let's come on to those other things and what we do about those in a moment. Let's start by saying, what about the information that we genuinely do provide Is that accessible? So let's have a look at the aspects of your practice. Think about your library service for the moment, and I'm going to look very quickly at these, I think there's 6 different aspects of how you communicate with learners. And what I'm just interested in doing here, we've got the, this is where you point at the little A just above the name list to poll and choose A, B, C, D or E. Let's start for the general information. I'll do these one at a time very quickly, and then Mags will just flash up the results when they come up. Remember, it's anonymous, so you can be completely honest. So for general information, is the general library information on your website or wherever, is it mainly text? A, is it image-rich text? Is it audio, video, or other? Of course, it may be a combination of all of those. Work on the basis that as you go downwards, it's kind of getting more accessible because the other things will be there as well. An assumption, but a reasonable assumption. So if you can pop in whether your general information on your library website, is it predominantly text, or is it text plus image-rich text, or is it those plus a bit of audio, which would be C? Have you got some video clips in there that would take you up to D? Very quickly, come on, there's only 6 people taking part so far. There we go. So mainly A's, B's, and a few with none, no information, or maybe not entered it. Okay, what about induction, library induction? So very quickly again, if we can do library induction, so clear the poll. And for your library induction, is that done predominantly with text, with image-rich text, with audio elements as well, with video elements or other elements? Other could be any kind of amazing interactivity stuff I haven't thought of. So very quickly, quick responses there. Oh, this is getting a bit more interesting. Be proud of yourselves. Okay, so what have we got there, Max? So for induction, we're kind of moving slightly more into the image-rich text and some audio, which is brilliant, and some others. If whoever did the other might be kind enough to pop into the chat pane what that other consists of, that would be really good, because we'd be very interested to know what sort of things that involves. May indeed not be technology as such, but that's great. Let us know. Okay, let's look at the next one. I've had some really interesting things at times looking through university library websites. It's a specialist hobby, and you have to be particularly of a particular mindset to do so. But it was for research purposes. I wanted to see if I was a dyslexic student going to, or a print impaired student of any kind, going to a university or college, what I would find about how the libraries would support me. And I'll tell you a little bit about it in a moment. But first of all, A, B, C, D, E. Your specific information for disabled people, particularly perhaps think of dyslexic or visually impaired, people with a print impairment. Is it predominantly text? Is it text plus kind of rich image support? Is it audio, or has it got audio elements or video elements or other? So A, B, C, D, very quickly. Okay, we've got 4 responses there, so if we can, for 5, any more quickly? Let's be quick on the buttons. For those of you, if you perhaps joined late and you're not quite sure what we're doing, just above the list of names where it talks about the main room and the moderators and things and your name in there, there are 4 buttons, and the one on the right has got a letter A, and we're clicking on the drop down there and choosing the letter A, B, C, D or E that responds to the question that I'm asking. So on that one, information for specific disability type information. So we're still talking about mainly image-rich text. Okay, it's good that it's got that image support. But if I tell you that a prestigious university, that's all I'll say, has an 8-page document for dyslexic learners telling them how they can access library services. I think there's a certain irony in giving somebody who has difficulty reading text, 8 pages of text, to tell them how you make it easier for them to read text. And those are the sorts of things, those are the sorts of ironies that we do find in many places. And creating audio, creating video is really simple. And I'm not going to talk about how you do it now, but again, there are free tools that you could use for doing even video, free tools, screen capture tools that you could do without a video camera. That's something to talk to Max and your local RSC about afterwards. Okay, I don't want to take too long on going through every one of these, so I think probably what I will, well, I think we've got the picture enough now. Let me just ask about equipment guides, because that can be an interesting one. I've seen some quite creative equipment guides. That's the last aspect of your practice. You may have guidance on using the photocopier, guidance on using particular bits of kit or technology in the library. Is that mainly A, B, C, D, or E? Is it mainly a text type guide, image-rich text, other audio guides, video guides? So just a quick responses there. Looks like mainly image-rich text. Okay, so again, a bit of a mixture. Now, there's got some human interventions as well. Looking down through the chat list, clearly people are getting some one-to-one human intervention, which is great. Okay, I think the point I'm going to make here, and I don't want to labour this point, and I don't want to kind of labour you on guilt trips, thinking, oh my goodness, why don't we have podcasts on this, that, and the other? But what I do want to kind of start with is this sense that for somebody who has print impairment, libraries can be daunting places. And I remember very vividly a student who, a dyslexic student, saying, I never go to the library because it's full of the enemy. It's full of printed text. And that was a very powerful feeling. Of course, the reality is that libraries have all sorts of other things in them as well that students often don't realize. Links to interactive materials, to the NLN materials, DVDs, all kinds of wonderful, amazing stuff. Some of the Jisc collections, some of the primal pictures kind of interactivity, fantastic resources that are there that really meet lots of accessibility needs. Tell them, and don't only tell them in text. And that may simply be a note to self at the moment, in terms of saying to yourself, you know, let's talk to the RSC about how you create podcasts. There's some brilliant stuff from Jisc on creating podcasts, digital media, got some great guides on it, and your local RSCs can help you. And Terry's got a link in there, not quite sure what that is there, I can't. Yeah, so various open source options and things, and I think Terry's pointing us there to some examples of how you can give accessible guidance in alternative formats to the very people that need it. Okay, that's only a tiny aspect of what I want to look at today. What I have said on the right-hand side is, you know, consider structured documents. The point about a structured document is that if you use the inbuilt heading styles in Word, for example, then that document can give any learner an instant overview of the headings and the subheadings. They can export it to a mind map in seconds. Consider synthetic audio. If you've got the Take This voices, the Scottish voices, any high quality voices installed on your system with some free text-to-speech software, then they can speak it. Even Word has got, Word 2007 onwards, has got text-to-speech built into it. Make sure it's working with one of those voices and it's great. Think of human voiced audio, video clips, screen capture videos, Xerti learning objects, web pages, quizzes, and comic strips. These lovely comic strip examples of library guides from Glasgow College of Arts, I think. Or it might not have been there, but it's somewhere like that. Max will correct me if I need it. Okay, so positive promotion. Here's some really good things that you can do. And this is about accessibility. This isn't just about making people know that your library service exists. You need to be promoting the benefits of your resources. And what do I mean by your resources? Let's just look below for a second. We mean the Jisc collections, the ebooks, the audio collections. I mean, Jisc Media Hub is full of thousands of hours worth of video and audio, thousands of images. There are learning materials on in the NLN resources in Joram, for example. So promote the benefits of those to your curriculum staff, because the bigger range of resources they can point students to, the more likely it is that a particular student with a particular need will really get on with a particular resource. Point them to support staff, because very often support staff are working in a vacuum. They are trying to help the student, but they don't know what the options are in terms of the learning materials that the student could be pointed to. So again, help them to know about the kind of electronic digital copies of things you have, because if a book or a resource is in digital format, you can generally change the font size, change the colors. You could get it to speak out to you using text-to-speech. And these are the sorts of benefits. It's not just for inclusion, but it's also people with different learning styles. They can listen to resources if they've got text-to-speech instead of having to read them. There's all sorts of differentiation benefits if people know the huge range of resources that you could point them to. Okay, so that's some positive promotion. Alongside that is this idea of making the most of your mainstream. Actually realizing that very often users can access content in a form that suits them without any intervention by learning support staff, without any intervention by anybody else, provided they know they can do it. So here are some things that we promote. This is a model that we've developed at TechDis on promoting alternative formats and recognizing that the ebooks are alternative formats. Your e-journals, if you're linked into eBury system, the eBooks for FE system, or Dawson Era, or any of those others, you've got general accessibility benefits. Like we said just now, changing colors, changing font size, copying and pasting into a Word document maybe, using text-to-speech. So promote the key subject resources that are relevant to your particular institution, and promote those subject resources for their accessibility benefits as well as their subject benefits. And then the user can directly access material in ways that they can personalize to them. That's not only going to benefit your disabled learners, that's going to benefit all kinds of learners, particularly, for example, people with English as a second or other language, because they can use text-to-speech to access those electronic resources. Now, in terms of the other media, let's switch to the other side of the diagram. Promotes the accessibility benefits of videos, podcasts, etc. You are exactly the place people might expect to go to find out, where can I get good science podcasts to support my BTEC in engineering, or my my Scottish Higher in biology, or whatever it might be. So do encourage the curriculum staff to work with you in helping to identify good sources. There are brilliant sources of podcasts on the web for all sorts of subject areas. Again, promote them, but also think of targeted promotion. If you've got 200 dyslexic learners in your organization, why not do a special flyer that talks about the videos and the podcasts that you've got? And then when it comes to the print books, the textbooks, for example, obviously that's a core way of getting information to people. Now, if people are struggling to use a textbook because of mobility issues, they can't handle it, or because of cognition issues, they can read it physically, but the words don't make sense, so they want text-to-speech, or maybe they can't see it to read it. Any of those, they will need to get it in an alternative electronic format. And there's two ways you can do this, and the best way is this left-hand route. If it isn't on your ebook system, or your ebook system doesn't have the accessibility they need, contact the publisher, and then in some cases the user will directly be able to access that. They get it from PDF format from the publisher. In other cases, they may need a bit of additional processing. If you've got a blind learner, for example, your PDF may need additional work doing to it, and then the user accesses it. So that's one route, and that's quite a labor-intensive route compared to ebooks and independent access to other media. The very worst labor-intensive approach is where you have to scan the book because the publishers haven't got it, and then you have to kind of put the headings into it or make it suitable for Braille. That's really slow, arduous and expensive, and we'll come back to that in a moment. So what I want to say for the moment is make the most of the mainstream. These left-hand and right-hand columns are where you should be focusing proactively some promotion about. If you've got print impairment issues, have a look at these because they're great things you can do. And that middle bit is a little bit more specialized. You may need to use our publisher lookup service to get hold of a publisher and get something directly from them. So, publisher lookup service, what does it look like? How does it work? It's a joint venture between us and the Publishers Association, where all the main publishers that UK learning providers use are listed on there. So if you need to contact one and say, look, I've got a dyslexic student really struggling to use this textbook, can I have it in electronic format? Then at least go to the Publisher Lookup website and you will have a link to the right person in that organization. It might be a phone number, it might be an email, but it'll be the one that the publisher provided themselves. And you can go directly there and request the book from them. Now, something that's happened very recently that we're very excited about, and some publishers are excited about but others aren't, is this little bit here. Give us feedback on a publisher. Now, let me just, I'm going to do a quick poll here. Are you ready, Mags? I want just a two poll, a yes or a no. If you have contacted a publisher to get a book in electronic format, I'd like you to tick yes, or whatever the first one is, yes, tick yes. And if you haven't ever, or to your knowledge nobody in your organization has ever contacted a publisher, can you tick no, and we'll just see what we've got. Because I don't want to be teaching grannies to suck eggs, but I don't want to be ignoring things if they're relevant to people. So we've got a more haven't than have. Okay, that's interesting. Of those that have, could you just pop into the text chat? Yes, if it's been generally a successful experience. No, if it was unsuccessful, or kind of maybe if it was a mix. So just very quickly, there were just just two of you, so it's hardly a representative sample, but I'm just interested. If you just pop into the text chat pane for those that did. Did it work? Was it useful? For those of you that haven't done this, we are getting thousands of hits a month on the Publisher Lookup website, and from publisher contacts we've got, it's made a big difference to the amount of people coming through to them. I've had two of the big publishers, two of the big academic publishers in the last year talk to me about what a big difference it's made to their workload. It's actually, in some ways, it's made it harder for them because they're getting more requests than they ever had before because people now know how to do it. But in some ways, they're feeling they're giving a much better customer service because previously it might have taken 3 weeks to get your request to the right person because you didn't know who to send it to, so it went round and round different departments. I haven't seen any yeses and nos in the bottom, so I'll carry on. What we would do, though, is we would encourage you, if you have somebody who's dyslexic, I would suggest that you are proactive at covering your backs in terms of the equality legislation, and that means proactive in ensuring that their core texts are either on your ebook system already, so they've got access to changing colors, changing text sizes, using text-to-speech. If they're not on your core system, I would strongly suggest you get in touch with the appropriate publishers and ask for a copy for your dyslexic students in alternative format. In most cases, although there's no obligation, in most cases they will provide it for free if you've already got copies. They're not obliged to do that. There's no reason why you shouldn't pay for it, but most publishers are actually very generous like that. And then, critically, give us feedback on publishers. Give us good feedback, because some publishers are investing lots of money on getting accessibility right. They have to demonstrate to their shareholders that it was worth doing. So really, focus on giving good feedback. It only takes a minute or two to do it. Give us bad feedback if that's appropriate as well, if you've got a really bad publisher, or they've taken hours and years to get back, or years and years to get back to you. Okay. Now, very quickly, I want to look at your platforms. Most of you will have platforms. We've talked about Dawson Era, eBury systems, and all sorts of other systems that you'll be using. Oh, Derek, you did put it in. I'm sorry, I didn't spot that. Yes, so you had a successful one. Stephen, it wasn't you personally, but you think it's been successful. That's great. Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, my text chat hadn't been scrolling. Okay. Let's think about the platforms for the minute, because it's not always obvious, but the platform you use is actually quite a separate issue from the publisher who provides the book files that go in the platform. So, for example, there are some really good publishers. I'm happy to name O'Reilly, and I'm happy to name Sage, for example. Brilliant feedback from librarians on how responsive they are and how seriously they take having an accessible text. Okay, so they have an accessible text file, but they don't often produce the platform that you access it through. So you might buy into a supplier like eBury, Dawson Era, half a dozen others, My iLibrary, Vital Source, etc. You buy a platform, and that platform sucks in the content from those different publishers, but that platform may have less accessibility than the files that it's trying to display. So in other words, and I've seen this demonstrated between, in front of 100 odd people, a blind student accessing a book that we know is highly accessible in its format through a platform that was very inaccessible, and he could not open it. So it's as important that you know about your platforms as you do have contact with your publishers. So let's have a look at what we mean by accessibility. Now again, when people talk about accessibility, they often talk technical stuff, and they talk about W3C, and they talk about WAI, and they talk about this standard and that standard. Well, it's nonsense really. You can afford to ignore a large amount of that if you focus on user experience. And the user experience is, what's the maximum font size? eBury, for example, maximum font size equivalent is about 14 points, maybe 16 points at best. Actually, if you are a visually impaired student, anything less than 26 points is equally hopeless. So that doesn't necessarily help. The other thing is, if text magnifies, does it reflow to fit the page, or do you have to then scroll interminably long sort of left and right scrolls to get to the end of a sentence and then go back to the beginning? Can you change colors? Can you change the font or the background? Are there keyboard alternatives to mouse clicks? Can you use shortcut keys or tab your way around? Can you navigate by different levels? Can I sort of go by chapter level, section level, subsection level, page number? The more I can navigate by those different levels, the better a screen reader user can find their way swiftly to a particular point. Will it work with text-to-speech tools? Doesn't have to be built in, but will it interoperate with Read and Write Gold, with some of the free things like Balabolka or Orato? Will it work with a screen reader? That's the only one that you can't test, probably, because all the others, there are free text-to-speech tools you could quickly test it with. The only one you probably couldn't personally test is that last one. So the implication of that is, well, first of all, do you know the answers? Do your learners know the answers? So here's another poll. And don't be shy of doing this, because we have to start with where the reality is. So in terms of the things that you do know about, is it A, B, C, or D? Again, click on that little A button at the top and select the one that's relevant to you. Now, if you've got lots of platforms, you may have to do a kind of middling guess. You may know more about some than others, and so just compromise. So I suspect for quite a lot of people it's going to be A or B, or possibly just A, but I may be wrong. I'm not going to preempt. So that's 4 of you. Thank you very much. Any more? I know some of you don't actually have platforms because you're perhaps an advisory service, so it's mainly don't knows and one knowing some of the accessibility features but don't promote. Okay. Now, again, I don't need to say anything about this because I think you will be the first people to say that you can see that there is a progression there that is, good practice progression. You are not alone in not knowing how accessible your platforms are. We did a survey of 49 higher education institutions across the UK last year. 50% of people did not know how accessible their platforms were. And yet, many of those platforms would actually meet the needs of loads of their print-impaired learners if they just knew, how you change the font size, how you make it reflow to fit the page, and how you change the colors. I mean, that alone will probably sort your dyslexic students and whether it interoperates with text-to-speech. So there are some really important things to do here. But before you, again, the last thing I'm going to do is kind of make you feel guilty and make you feel, I am a worm, I am no man or woman. That's not what it's about. What it's about saying is, clearly, students need to know what the accessibility features are. Somebody has to tell them. I don't think that somebody should be you, or at least maybe it should be you, but I don't think you're the ones that have to go and find out. And I'll explain that more in a moment. And this is all to do with some work we're doing at the moment. We're working with Editeur, which is the trade standards body for publishing and the whole publishing and supply industry. And what we're doing at the moment is we are approaching, I think there's 10 major platform providers that we've identified, and we're approaching them with exactly that information. Whoops, sorry, not that information, that information. And we are saying to them, this isn't a job for hundreds of librarians across the library to do on their own in their spare time. This is something for the supplier to do. So we're asking the suppliers to tell us what they do on each of those. And we're then going to pull it all together into a comparative table so that you will be able to point your learners, if you've got 3 or 4 different platforms, point your learners to our comparative table and they will see, yes, it does this, no, it doesn't do that. That saves them wasting time and it saves you wasting time. We fully expect that not everybody will respond to that. Okay, they're commercial businesses. They don't have to answer surveys that we ask them. But this is a pincer movement, and if they, those that don't give us feedback, we're going to get feedback a different way because we're going to run some library accessibility action days with the support of groups like Claude and Open Rose Group, which are sort of accessibility focused library groups. Hope to get Silip and Sconal and others involved. And what we want to do with that is for those that haven't given us any feedback, we'll see if we can have a week during the term or perhaps towards the end of the term where we get dozens and dozens of learning providers across the country all emailing the same organization, the same provider, and asking the same awkward questions, because I think it'll be difficult to ignore 30 or 40 of your customers. It may be easy to ignore just take this an editor. So that's something that's good news for you, but bear in mind that this is an ongoing process. So I think one of the things that will be good for you to do when we get back to this slide here about these sorts of things, do just have a quick check at sometimes, or maybe if you've got some library volunteers that can help you with the library, get them to just have a scout around and find out maybe there is an accessibility statement on the platform somewhere, and all you need to do is make it more obvious, because maybe it's just something nobody's found yet. Okay, so you can get heard. Now, getting heard is really important, and it has a financial benefit to it. And I want to just do some sums very quickly. We're in the last 5 minutes now. Very quickly, do some sums to have a look at how much you could save. Now, this is possibly not going to save you a lot at the moment, because if at the moment, as we've seen, the majority of you responding haven't actually contacted publishers for accessible formats. So if at the moment your dyslexic students, for example, and I mention dyslexics because they are the biggest, statistically they are the biggest bunch of disabled students you will have. If they're not getting support at the moment, then you're not going to save anything in the sums that come up, because there's no change. You haven't done it now, so whatever the publishers do won't save you money. However, I want to also do some calculation compared to how much you would need to spend if you were fully meeting the requirements of the Equality Act, and if all print disabled students demanded accessible resources. Let me give you some background figures just to put it in context. In this survey we did last year, we worked out, this was a higher education survey, the numbers would have been worse for further education. I know that because I've already done an FE survey. But in higher education, where students have disabled student allowances and so on, so money isn't necessarily an object, we found that there were on average 600 to 700 print-impaired students per organisation. So if you simply take statistical averages of the number of learners in a university and the number of learners with print impairment compiled from the HESA statistics, 600 students in a typical institution. We then looked at how many organisations were contacting publishers for accessible formats in a year. The median was 5 to 15 requests in a year for potentially 600 students, and most of those 5 to 15 requests that were made were for 1 or 2 students. So basically we got something like 99.9% of print impaired students not being served. That's not safe in terms of the Equality Act. Let's just have a look at some actual data from a couple of different universities, put them together for a worst case scenario. So this is Leeds University, had 24 students. Okay, Leeds University in this example are only talking about visually impaired students. They haven't got the capacity at the moment to meet the needs of all their dyslexic students as well. But let's just take it as it is with the numbers. 24 students. Now Leeds has got a very active service, Leeds Metropolitan this is. 505 requests from 24 students, an average of 21 requests per student. There were 1,071 students registered with disability services. If they all made an average of 21 requests, that is 23,000 requests for alternative formats that they would be making. That is, that is outlandish in terms of the number of things that you might be dealing with. But within the scope of the Equality Act, that is a perfectly reasonable top figure. Now, the University of Dundee have done some really interesting work on, auditing the cost of scanning an ebook. If you, did it by an ebook scan rather than contacting a publisher or pulling it down off a main ebook e-platform system, they reckon scanning an ebook is £600 in terms of total full cost recovery, staff time, etc. Put that together for a worst case scenario where you've got an inaccessible ebook platform, you've got publishers that haven't got the copies in stock in PDF format or won't get it to you, so you just end up scanning them all, and you've got legally aware students who know exactly what they're entitled to. That could cost you 14 million. The figures are quite exciting, really. They're mind-boggling figures. And so, what do we do about it? This is what we do about it, and this is the last slide. What we do about it is we make sure that we don't shut the stable after the horse has bolted, because every year you are renewing licenses on various systems. When we asked in our survey which of the statements best describes your organization's policy towards the procurement of ebooks, is accessibility a deciding factor? Is accessibility considered? Is it not considered, or do you not even know? We found that for nearly 20%, accessibility was the deciding factor. Some people are realizing they can save enormous amounts of time and money by making sure their mainstream systems are accessible. If you take, we had very nearly 50%, 49%, it was either a deciding factor or considered. And the others either didn't know or it just wasn't considered. Now, I would love to be able to revisit this graph in a year's time and see that maybe for half of them it was a deciding factor, and for most of the other half it was considered. Because that is the point where you save money, you save hassle, you do a better service for more students, and you do less work to get it. And it's at that point of procurement where you make sure that whoever's doing your procuring talks in detail about what accessibility means to you and why you have to have it as a result of the Equality Act and so on. It would not take many universities having that conversation for every one of your platform suppliers to suddenly become amazingly compliant in terms of accessibility. I'm leaving you there with a few websites, the Publisher Lookup website, which we've talked about. You've seen a screenshot. We do have our online accessibility self-evaluation for library services. If you wanted to have a look at that, search for OACs on the TechDis website. And if you wanted to see the research report that I was talking about, 49 HE institutions, that's available also on that tiny URL. And that is me done with, I believe, a minute and a half to spare.
Alistair, thank you very, very much indeed. I think the statistics that Alistair has presented to us in relation to alternative formats really are significant, and when you look at what potentially can be done and what isn't done, often you realise that there is a significant kind of difference in a markup in terms of the amount of work, not only the work in terms of manpower it undertakes to create books and resources and alternative formats in-house, but also the cost. And I think that for me, another significant issue, this is the power of crowd or people sourcing or pooling their resources or their voices together, and I think that that's potentially where the publisher lookup and the feedback is important. And I know that myself and my colleague who's joined us today, Penny Robertson, will be really working hard to work with and to help facilitate these accessibility action days here in Scotland as well, that Alistair has mentioned. And really just finally, I think I lost you all there. I do apologise. Yeah, just a quick mention to their forum, which is taking place in October the 17th, which really will focus on this area and will maybe be of interest to both library staff and inclusion practitioners. So I'm just going to finish there with a wonderful word of thanks to Alistair for all his hard work, for his wonderful presentation, to sharing his knowledge and his insights, and thanks to all of you for joining us. So thank you very much indeed.